Welcome back, friends, to session 3 of our time with Dr. Amy Oden and her book, Right Here, Right Now. So, Dr. Oden, this week you have another practice for us to start with. Tell us a little bit about Teresa of Avila and her practice, the prayer of recollection.
Yes, this is another mindfulness practice that, in her own way, brings our attention, our awareness from all the distractions around us back to our awareness of God's presence with us, even now. She was a busy pastor in her own way. She was a nun who was running a convent. She founded convents. She was constantly having people in and out of our office, responding to correspondence. So just picture all of that. And she wanted a prayer to help her pause regularly and bring her awareness, right, to the presence of God, to this present moment. So I'm going to invite you to, if you have your copy of the book with you, to take a moment to look at the text of this prayer in chapter 3, and in the paperback copy, it's on page 64, because I want to kind of do a little bit of translating here of what she means. About halfway through the prayer, you'll see ... and then it says, "Help me, O Lord, to withdraw my senses from exterior things." Okay, that means, right, from all these distracting screens, voicemails, right, all the external triggers, stimuli, distractions, right? She says, "Help me withdraw my senses, my hearing, my seeing, my feeling, my awareness," right? It's a way of bringing ourselves back home again, right? To bring that awareness back. And then she goes on, "Make them," my senses, "make them docile to the commands of my will." So instead of my senses running the show and reacting to everything around me, instead, let them be guided by my own heart, by what I truly want. And she goes on, "So that when I want to converse with you, when I want to recognize you, Lord, then they will retire at once. My senses will retire, right? They'll come back home like bees coming back to the hive to make honey, right? So the prayer of recollection is to kind of bring our senses back, not to escape the world, not to reject the world, but to have a home base that is sound and grounded in the source of life, in God. Okay, so I just
That's
kind of
so
want to
helpful. That is so helpful, Amy,
that.
because recollection could, I think we immediately think memory,
Right,
like
remembering. Yeah,
remembering, but recollecting all of our senses back to home base. That's so good. Thank you so
right,
much for that.
right.
Okay,
Especially
awesome.
when we have multitasking going on and
Yes,
we're doing 15 things at once.
exactly.
Okay, so with that, let's again always begin with some mindful breathing. You know this now. You don't need me to guide you. Take 3 or 4 good, slow, deep breaths and allow that breathing to bring your awareness into your body, into your breath. And as I read this prayer of recollection out loud, notice what happens in your body with each phrase. Notice the little heaven of your soul where God has established God's own dwelling. And if it helps to put a hand over that place on your body, whether that's over your heart, if that's where God dwells, for some of us, it's our gut. It may be over your abdomen. It may be, and you don't have to do this at all, but if that helps you focus as you listen, focus on embodiment, feel free to do that. Give me the grace to recollect myself in the little heaven of my soul, where you have established your dwelling. There, you let me find you. There, I feel that you are closer to me than anywhere else. And there, you prepare my soul quickly to enter into intimacy with you. Help me, O Lord, to withdraw my senses from exterior things. Make them docile to the commands of my will, so that when I want to converse with you, they will retire at once, like bees shutting themselves up in the hive in order to make honey. Pause to notice what arises in you, in your body, in your breathing, any awareness, sensations, feelings, and hold these with God now. And as you hold this with God, holding the little heaven of your soul where God dwells, notice what you discover. God with us, Emmanuel. Amen.
That little heaven of our souls. Such a beautiful image. And the delightful image of the bees shutting themselves up in the hive. I know that there are some of our ancient spiritual ancestors who actually created little cells that were like beehives, and they went in there to pray. Why do you think bees are such a poignant spiritual image?
They are very industrious, and that's often pointed out in different religious orders. And I think because they are communal, I mean, that's the other thing that's important to notice. None of those bees can do that on their own. And I think we have to be reminded of that. That's why we're doing this study as a group. It's easier for us to be in this practice all together than to do by ourselves. And I think that's also important to notice. Yeah.
Yeah. And I love in your book that you have individual practices and communal practices, and that you help us understand how we can do these things together. Yeah, wonderful. So scripturally, in this chapter, you pull out the great commandment as something to pay attention to in our quest for mindfulness, Christian mindfulness. Tell us a little bit more about that great commandment, helping us focus our peripheral attention on God's love for us and our response.
Yeah, I mean, because the great commandment connects all the dots for us that we tend to pull out and isolate. We tend to think of social action, loving our neighbor, as separate from spiritual formation, loving God, as separate from self-care or self-compassion. Or many of us think of simply that as being self-absorbed, so we don't do it at all. Right. So these things get separated in a lot of our organizational life. But the scriptural ground is very integrated. And when we practice mindfulness, when we bring ourselves into God's presence, right? We don't stop with simply being aware of our bodies and our breath. That's important. That's an important avenue. We also are aware of God, so we integrate that. And the more we integrate God's presence, right, with our own experience of the present moment, then those marks, right, of becoming rooted, grounded, of becoming grateful, and of becoming open-hearted, right, then open us to love our neighbor. We cannot love our neighbor on our own simply by, I'm going to roll up my sleeves today and love my neighbor and just reach down in me and just summon it out of nothing. No.
And you will be loved.
We don't have that kind of power. I don't care how wonderful you are. You are a human being. God is the source of love. So if we want to love our neighbor, we've got to dwell in that heart of love so that it can overflow, right? So that's how all of these are connected.
Yeah, that's so good. And so my aha for this chapter has to do with my own practice of what I call CCC every morning. That's candles, coffee, and contemplation. And sometimes there's a fourth C, and that's the cat, if the cat decides to join me. But what I find is that, basically I read a devotion, I take a couple of deep breaths, I journal, because that's a way that I can get my thoughts out and see what's going on within me. And I find that if I don't do that, if I get out of that practice, I just moved. And so what happens when you move. It's like you wake up and you hit the ground running and you start to, get your world ordered. And so I stopped for a little while and I became a little irritable. And I became, I lost a sense of that in the morning, like where I was and how I was doing and just connecting with God and then moving into my day. So that was my little aha, is that this is the way I relate to other people is affected by my own practice of centering myself and connecting to God.
Absolutely.
Yeah. What was your experience of getting used to these practices and then teaching them and introducing them?
Well, I started writing this book in 2016. And in 2017, as I was just finishing it up, my husband was diagnosed with frontotemporal dementia in his late 50s. And our lives became really hard and really chaotic. And I didn't know from day to day, month to month, year to year, what he was going to be able to do or not do. And mindfulness practice that I had been studying and practicing for several years really was just such a powerful grounding to be present to this person that I love, who can't live in the future, who can't live in the past, who can only live in this present moment. And learn to love and behold who he is right now. He's not who he was. I don't know who he's going to be, but this is who he is now. When I can be mindful of God's life here now with me and let that flow. So in my own life, that's been a very hard and grace-filled and important practice, that's super practical as I walked this journey with him over several years.
Thank you for telling us that. That's powerful. Well, friends, as you get deeper and deeper into this idea of Christian mindfulness, we wish you every blessing in your conversation that follows. So be well, and we will see you next time.